Hello, Sunbeams. As you know, we are all about building the fairy tale life of our dreams from our books, TV show, anime, manga, movies. But when do you determine if a book, TV show, all of those I just said, is worth finishing? So today we will be going over a set of guidelines to help you determine when it's time to close the book and turn off the TV and when it's worth continuing. This is commonly known as DNFing in the bookish space, which means do not finish. However, the principles I think can be applied to TV shows and movies as well. So this video will be divided up into 3 parts. The first of which will talk about what the general guidelines scope is for you to consider for your DNF rules. And then we'll go over my personal DNF rules as an example so you can see how those can come into play. And then lastly, we'll wrap up with my 5-star rating system. You guys can post your rating systems in the comments just for funsies, and we will be on our way. So the first point to consider when making up your own set of guidelines or reading rules is, what do you read or watch TV, movies for? What do you want to feel? What do you want to get out of it? What do you want to learn? This should be your primary North Star, simply because I'm assuming you are consuming this media because you want to enjoy yourself. So if you are not enjoying yourself or getting what you wanted to get out of your media consumption, there's no point. So consider that first of all. Perhaps you are one of the lucky few and you have unlimited time, but for the rest of us whose time is precious, you may as well make sure that you are enjoying and loving every second of the time you are spending on your books or movies. The second point is, what do you enjoy about your stories? Are you somebody who is extremely character driven? Are you extremely plot driven? Do you love really lush worlds? Are you not really that into world building? What kind of plots, genres, and moods do you enjoy reading? How important is character development to you? Now, what topics do you prefer not to consume? Think of anything that may potentially be triggering, disturbing, or just mildly upsetting. I've popped some resources down in the description box below to help you navigate through some content warnings that will guide you in your search. And lastly, generally, what are some deal breakers to you? The last book that you finished and you were like, oh, I should have stopped reading this when X happened, or I can't believe they're doing this again, or I really hate when so-and-so happens. These can give you some clues as to what could be DNF indicators for you, so reflect back on your past reading or watching experience and consider what really turned you off. What did you not really enjoy? Now with that out of the way, we will go into an example with my personal DNF rules, and you can use that as some inspiration. So for me, I am a heavily character-driven consumer. Whether it's books or movies, I really want to relate to characters. So if the characters are not relatable, interesting, they're not driving the story, I'm not rooting for them, that is one vote towards a DNF for me. Now, I will consider continuing even if the characters aren't driving it, I'm not rooting for anybody or connecting with anybody, if the plot is good. If the plot is inconsistent, it doesn't make any sense, it doesn't feel like there's any direction, and I'm like 30-ish% of the way through the book, that's usually a point towards DNFing. So I also have my personal set of trigger warnings and things that I prefer not to consume in my enjoyable media. So if I come across those topics, that is another DNF point for me. More specifically, I should mention, I don't mind so much if there is mildly disturbing content, but it serves a purpose. The disturbing content is not the destination, and it's not just shock value. There's a reason we have it. It serves the story, it serves the plot, it serves the character development. So there are certain instances where I will excuse it if it is done with intention. So I think we all have those little guilty pleasure shows, or I do, where a plot is really, really predictable and straightforward, but it's comforting or it has some other elements to it. If a plot is annoyingly predictable, I have zero interest in the characters and anything else that's going on, I just feel like I was told what was going to happen and now I'm watching it happen, that's usually a point to DNF if it does not have any other redeeming qualities. I think pacing issues is usually one of the biggest reasons why I would DNF something. If it's going far too fast or significantly too slow. Usually on the slower end is where I will wind up DNFing something, but any large time skips that aren't justified, we're jumping forward a year and then a week and then this and then that, and it has to make sense. Going along with this, writing inconsistencies or paragraph density is hard to follow. Like, again, spending a really long time describing one singular thing and then jumping into action and then spending a really long time describing something. So pacing, but specifically when it comes to writing inconsistencies. Grammar mistakes, I mean, that's what your editor is for. However, you know, things happen, we're all human. So that's usually that is a smaller point. That's usually like half a point for me. Also, a lot of the time I'll find, especially in fantasies, when a lot of very specific terminology is used, that's okay, that's fine, but it should be used in such a way, in my opinion, that the reader isn't completely like flipping back and forth trying to figure out what that means or where that term was last mentioned. Context clues are really appreciated there, so that kind of goes into writing consistency and readability. And my last rule is the story is just not holding my attention. And this is usually, if this is the only point that is coming up in my DNF checklist, it usually is a soft DNF for me because I'm a huge mood reader. So it's probably just not the right time, and I'll get more into mood reading later. Okay, so the next thing we're going to do is weigh our DNF criteria. So it's completely up to you how you want to determine how many points is equal to a DNF. So for example, if you have 5 reading rules that you've identified based on what we've discussed, and you decide they're all equally weighted, I don't think any one of them is particularly worse than the other, then you could assign 1 point to each. So maybe once you get 3 points and you've ticked off 3 points on that DNF checklist, that's a DNF for you. Or you can change the weighting system. So you can say maybe triggering material is worth 3 points versus the rest of your points are only 1 point. So in summary, decide what's important to you, decide what your deal breakers are, come up with a system, try the system, tweak the system, reinstate the system. And as I mentioned earlier, soft DNFing is also an option. Sometimes I've actually found that I'll be watching something and I cannot just put my finger on what the issue is, and it's just not holding my attention. There's something odd, I'll just soft DNF it and come back to it, because sometimes I'm just not in the headspace to appropriately categorize what the issue is, or I'm just not in the mood for it. I'm just not in the headspace, or I just need a particular piece and style of media. So that's why when I was talking about earlier, asking what types of genres do you like, what types of stories do you like, sometimes I'm just in the mood for something which is a little bit more educational, something a little bit more fluffy, or I really want high stakes and I really want a good solid mystery. So understanding what your categories are, what you enjoy, can help you understand what am I not responding to. Maybe it's just not the time and you're not in the mood. And ultimately, hopefully you finish more books and movies and TV shows than you have to DNF, depending on who you are and how liberal you are with your system. But for me, I also like to have a star rating system. So some things I consider in my star rating system is a 1 star. That is utterly atrocious. There's no redeeming qualities in this. This is usually something that I've DNF. I don't think there are very few instances where I'll give a 1 star to something that I actually finished, because usually by that point I've not finished it if I'm giving it a 1 star, or I did because I hoped it got better and I'm really sad that I wasted all of that time. 2 stars is I liked some elements. There were some things that kept it from being an absolute disaster, but overall, wouldn't recommend. I give my 3 stars to something that is equally good and bad. I can see the critique, but I can also see the enjoyment. But overall, it was a good time. 4 stars are pretty good, some minor issues, but overall enjoyed it. The issues and critiques that I have usually aren't enough that I would completely knock it to 3 stars, but still, some critiques were had. There was still some room for improvement and some things I would have liked to see. 5 stars is obsessed, can't get enough of it, want more, perfect, enjoyable experience, kicking my feet. Yeah, great, wonderful, love to see it. I would love to know, what is your star ranking system? Put it in the comments below, as well as any DNF rules that you would like to share. It would be wonderful to have a conversation going on how we determine whether or not books, TV shows, and movies are worth our time, and ultimately make it into our fairy tale lifestyle inspiration. I hope you have a magical rest of your day and you feel like you have a little bit more confidence to close the book, turn off the TV, and pursue something more in line with your desires. Have a magical rest of your day. Bye!